Our next speaker is Julie Hirsch. She is the president of the Hirsch Foundation. She speaks nationally on the importance of mental health and wellness. Featured on Think on KERA, a Dallas NPR affiliate, Fox and Friends, Dr. Oz, high schools, universities, as well as ground rounds at numerous medical schools, Julie combines humor and science as she explains how she manages her own depression and bipolar disease. A leading philanthropist in Dallas, she championed the creation of the Center for Depression Research and Clinical Care at the University of Texas Southwestern, serves on the UTSW President's Advisory Council, and is the chair of the Dallas Theater Center. At Notre Dame, she funded the In Their Shoes course at the Center for Social Concerns and has frequently spoken for the Hesburgh USCO Scholars. She's a blogger for Psychology Today and author of Struck by Light Living. Is that the book up there? Yeah, which you can grab a copy of on your way out. Reprinted for the third time in January of 2017 and available in Spanish under the title Decidi Vivir. Okay.
Awesome.
She lives with her husband Ken in Dallas and has 2 children at Cringe, Northwestern. At Notre Dame, she lived in Breen Phillips and majored in marketing. Please welcome Julie Hirsch.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brian. Rose, thank you so much for creating this. I think it's a really cool idea, and thank you all for being here. My first depressive break was my freshman year at Notre Dame. You can see me here. I don't exactly look like a dark, troubled soul. I'm sprinting away from Flanner and guys like Larry Kistner in this photograph that land in the Observer. I had 2 roommates that were really polar opposite. My roommate that you see on the right, Michelle, had a habit of ripping up my cigarettes, and she actually got me to quit because every time I would buy a pack of cigarettes, she would, did someone do that for you too? Yeah, she would rip them up. She also gave me the joy of sex for Christmas, figuring I needed a lot of help in that area. I appreciate both gifts. Then Peggy was very quiet. I don't know if Peggy is here today, but she was at the beer tent last night, and I think she spent most of the time just trying to, silently observe and shock the other 2 of us. So in 1979, in January, we were all going along pretty well. I actually did really well first semester, made Dean's List, but then in January of 1979, I had that perfect combination of stress. I had a guy that I really cared about break up with me suddenly. I was in sort of the existential college crisis of I knew I didn't want to be pre-med. I don't know how many other of you went through this crisis, but didn't know who I wanted to be or what I wanted to be. I also had an injury, so I couldn't run, and I didn't realize at that time how critical exercise was to my mental health. And then finally, I was experiencing my first South Bend winter, which I had no idea how much that affected me. And I can hear from the voices, maybe it affected a few other you as well. Okay, but I did survive. You can see from the photograph, I went to parties. I think that was a gangsta party that we had at one time, a little bit different than gangsters today, but this is what we did back then. Was participated in the in-hostel games, and I even dressed like an elf. Life went on, and I remember going home at spring break and begging my parents to let me take a year off. And my dad was a military guy. It's like, no, you got to get it out, you got to do it. And I did, and I went back and I did finish, but I went with the same course load from a 3.4 to a 2.2, and was pretty miserable my sophomore year as well. But anyway, I did graduate. My junior and senior year were great at Notre Dame. I ended up going to California, meeting my husband Ken, as you can see in the photograph. We he invited me to go to marry him and move to Dallas. He promised me it was going to be a 3-year stint. It's been 27 years of marriage. He's banking on the fact that I don't count very well. And we had 2 kids. This is my daughter Rachel, our son Daniel at about 5 and 7 years old. Life went on pretty well. I mean, I didn't really have issues with depression until 2001. And in January of 2001, not surprisingly, January again, I went to my family physician and I said, look, I'm losing weight, which for me is never a common thing, losing weight rapidly, I can't sleep, I don't seem to want to do anything. He took a blood test and looked at me and said, "You're fine, go home." It was actually my sister-in-law who said, "Look, you're depressed." I had my first antidepressant, and then I went on the roulette wheel of medication. It was a really rough 9 months. I attempted suicide 3 times. And then finally, in September of 2001, September of 2001, when probably most of us were watching 2 planes crash again and again into the Twin Towers, I sat in a locked psychiatric ward waiting for my first session of electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT. The good news is it worked, and I'm here. And as you can see, this is me a few weeks after having ECT with my daughter Rachel. We're at the Texas State Fair. It was actually kind of fun because I had been to the State Fair earlier in the month and had a little memory issues, so I saw everything really new and fresh for the first time. See, Brian, I'm taking that positive attitude even back then. So I ended up writing this book, Struck by Living, and I'm giving away free copies today. Please take several copies so I don't have to lug them home. And it was really this amazing experience that I got to go through. So we published the book in 2010. I've been speaking all over the country. I am frequently put on panels with people a lot smarter than me, neuroscientists, and actually Gil Wolfe do you know Gil Wolfe? Yeah, okay. Anyway, but I've gotten all sorts of opportunities because of this terrible thing that happened. One thing our family foundation did was I really felt like we had to do something to move the meter on mental illness. And so we were the first contributors to the Center for Depression Research and Clinical Care at UT Southwestern. We did this because the person who leads the center, Madhukar Trivedi, is one of the most holistic psychiatrists I've ever met. This guy really is onto something. He believes, as I do, the way we're going to get in front of mental illness is by doing 2 things. One, to get better tools for physicians to detect illness when it's small and manageable, just like any other illness. If you can catch something as a cold before it escalates into pneumonia, you're going to have a lot better chance of getting better. So this is the idea. He's already started with a simple iPad program in 19 primary care clinics. People go into their primary care clinic in Dallas, and no matter what they're there for, they go through and they have a very in-depth depression screen, just the same way that they would have their blood pressure checked or another vital sign. He calls it vital sign 6. Already in a very short period of time, about 1.5 years, he's already found 1 biomarker that's allowing people to increase the effectiveness of the medication that they use. Now, it's not, this has been a really exciting time. I get a lot of questions about what does depression look like? And I thought one thing that I would stress to you is depression is, like diabetes, a chronic disease. And it's really all about managing it on a daily basis, on a monthly basis. But if you manage the small stuff, it actually isn't a big problem to manage. One of the things that's kind of interesting is when I first went on book tour, I didn't talk about what I did to stay well because I thought, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not going to dictate to people what they do to stay well. But then I thought it was too depressing to just talk about depression. So I did start talking about what I did to stay well, and I noticed this is what everybody was scribbling down. There's also, as I've done my own research, I've created a list that in this new publication of the book, and we call it the Struck by Living Top 10. These are the top 10 things I do to stay well. Most of it is not rocket science. It's things like sleep, exercise, nutrition, things that everybody can do at very little to no cost. We just have sort of gone away from basic health care for ourselves. That's really important. So anyway, getting back to what does depression look like? You can see two photographs here. On the left is my family on Mother's Day about, what was Mother's Day, a month ago? And so we got together with them at Cringe, Northwestern, and had just this fabulous brunch. I look pretty happy there. The photograph on the left is actually from last August. I was running with my daughter in Prague. We had gone on what I call the death and destruction tour that my husband insisted we go on. We went to Auschwitz, we saw both the Berlin Holocaust Museum, the Prague Holocaust. I mean, we saw everything to do with the Holocaust. He's Jewish, and so I guess he had some things to work out. Unfortunately, it cratered me, along with some other stuff. So if you see me on the left, you'll notice that, I don't know if you can tell how much thinner I am in that photograph than I am right now, probably close to 20 pounds thinner. I look stressed, and in fact, right after taking that photograph, I said to my daughter, Rachel, whatever happens to me, know that it is not out of lack of love for you. And so my daughter, she just turned 21, looked at me and said, Mom, we're going to get back to Dallas. You're going to have ECD. You're going to be fine, and you cannot talk to me like that. And I thought, she is a steely woman. But what's so great about that is here we've been talking to our kids since they were 5 and 7 that this is a disease, this is manageable, and guess what? They actually believe it. There's a small sequel to that story. About 3 or 4 months after that, I did end up having ECT, recovered again, did really well. And about 3 or 4 months later, Rachel called me in the middle of the day, which is always a panic because this is a kid who does everything on her own. I mean, can you imagine some kid saying, well, Mom, we're just going to go back to Dallas. You're having ECT and everything's going to be fine. She's going to be running the world someday, and it's going to be a lot better. Anyway, so she said, I'm thinking, okay, why is she calling me in the middle of the afternoon? Those of you who have girls as children, is she pregnant? Did she flunk a test? She said, Mom, I have an interview tomorrow and I need to know my strengths. And so immediately, she was believe it or not, a really good basketball player. I know it's hard to, she's my size, but she was a really good basketball player. And I said, oh, remember your clear thinking on the court and you could know the whole game strategy. And she goes, yeah, I know I'm clear thinking, I know. I need when I did this in crisis. And I said, okay, Rachel, think about this summer. Think about when you had to take me and check me into a locked psychiatric ward. How many people your age could do that? And she paused for a moment and she said, wow, this is really great. She said, this depression stuff is a gold mine. It got me my first A in English. I'm pretty sure it got me into Northwestern, and I think it's going to get me my first job. So in conclusion, so she's obviously doing okay. In conclusion, I like to, when I'm in groups like this, I like to always have a call to action, because this is a group of people that is incredibly bright and incredibly powerful. And so my call to action to you is this. Think about what you need to stay well. Write those things down and protect them and do them. It's a lot easier to stay well than it is to recover from illness. And unfortunately, we usually think of what we need to do to stay well after we get sick. And the second thing is to be open with our stories. So often I hear people talk about the stigma of mental illness. And yes, there is stigma out there, but we need to start treating this like having a cold, like having diabetes, and not being afraid to talk about it and joke about it. I know this is maybe some might consider what I've just done sacrilege, but I really don't think it is. I think the more that we're open about it and can laugh about it and work together, we're all going to be better off. So thank you very much.